The self who can stand against all under heaven does not exist. It is like writing the words, "our land," into the sand and claiming they matter more than the wind that will wipe them away. The film Hero from 2002, starring Jet Li, is a fundamentally misunderstood masterpiece in the West. The film is beloved by an audience, but they unfortunately likely don't understand the film's true point, or why it is a masterful work of art. Why is Hero a masterpiece? First, let's talk about why it's misunderstood. When I was watching this movie first time, I was young in theaters, and I loved it, but I didn't get it. I knew the film had some deep message, but it didn't hit with me, or I knew there's something I wasn't getting. This fundamental misunderstanding is the same one everyone else had, and it has to do with Broken Sword's conclusion. The translation of his calligraphy in English demographics was, "our land." 2 words for 2 characters, but the ancient Chinese characters depicted was actually 3 words in English, which are, "all under heaven." This is a Taoist concept called Tian Xia, which, yes, is 2 characters in ancient Chinese, but translates into English as 3 words, "all under heaven," and not "our land." Why is this important? Because it changes the entire movie from a meditation on the cosmic dissolution of self into the universe into an imperialist statement on the futility of resisting totalitarianism. Seriously, this one mistranslation destroys the entire film in the West because it materializes a spiritual concept into a material dissonance, because our mistranslation sells a spiritual movie about letting go of the self into a material call for conquest and domination of the world. So how do we properly read the film in light of the fact the scroll doesn't say, "our land," and in fact says, "all under heaven"? It means the entire film is a meditation on the approach to this truth from a perspective of being very far away from and not understanding it at all, to being incredibly close to it and understanding it so intimately you'd rather die yourself than stain it with the blood of vengeance. In the original Western release, the film says, "Don't stand up to the state, it's pointless. We'll crush you every time." And this was more than a destruction of the film's meaning. It completely dismantles its soul. It turns a spiritual declaration of Chan Buddhism, emptiness of self, into the exact opposite of its original intending meaning. It instead becomes a monument to materialist desire and assertion of self over the significance of the universe. This is what turning "all under heaven" into "our land" does to the film Hero. So this is why we in the West completely misunderstood it. Because the mistranslation focused our attention on the land beneath the sky, and not the sky we are all beneath. Tian Xia is about becoming one with everything, all under heaven. But this translation posits the king as nothing but a killing conqueror, and Nameless as a coward who gives up his fight against a totalitarian dictator. No. The film is about an assassin learning that all under heaven is more important than the suffering of any one individual, and that the self he clings to who believes he deserves vengeance does not exist before all under heaven. And this is the point of the film in the end. The arrows on the gates outlining Nameless are an enso, a calligraphic statement of emptiness that depicts the masterful absence of the man who believed killing the king of Qin was necessary. And so the story is about the scroll of Broken Sword's truth. All under heaven dispels the illusion the self who asserts vengeance can be satisfied because an I exists to take it. But this collapses once one accepts peace. Because then the self who demanded vengeance can die and end in the acceptance peace embraces, where the desire to kill ends. That is the true meaning of the film, the scroll and the 3 levels of swordsmanship. The king's Mu Tao at the end, his great realization, is that the scroll means all under heaven, not our land. The monumental shift in meaning is that the king is not a conquering warlord exerting his will over others to satiate his ego. He is a sovereign ruler trying to unite an empire out of several disparate kingdoms to end the disharmony of serving different feudal lords, rather than one state of united and equivalent laws. This turns him from a bloodthirsty killer in the original translation to a just king who exerts the will of his kingdom even when it violates his own sentimental desire, making him a true king and not a warlord. Why this is important is because it turns Nameless from a cowardly assassin who nihilistically abandons his purpose into an expression of the end of craving a self who is more important than all under heaven. Thus, Nameless becomes the true hero of the film because he defeats the logic of everyone around him using a hidden skill of Buddhist reductionism, whereupon Mu Tao is the point of the entire film. The great realization the scroll means all under heaven is what unites us all, not that uniting land is what must make us all one. By retranslating correctly, we arrive at the film's true purpose. Hero is an exploration for how the 3 levels of swordsmanship described by the King of Qin explain exactly how Nameless is able to instantly choose mercy, even after he had made the decision to kill, because his realization is the same as the king's. That the ultimate ideal is for a warrior to abandon the sword because it symbolizes the need to define oneself through killing and harming others. Freed from this, in the moment he realizes killing the king will stain Broken Sword's scroll with the king's blood, if he had killed the king, the scroll behind would speckle with blood, proving that's all Nameless was in the end of that choice. A master of killing, a stain of blood cursing all under heaven. That is one side of his choice, and it was the same choice that brought him from 100 paces to 0. So the true mastery of his swordsmanship is not a lethal technique within 10 paces. His mastery is choosing mercy in the instant he sees himself becoming a stain of blood on all under heaven. So only a master could reverse his blade in the same motion he sought to strike it. His motion must be one where the blade's motion of logic must use its initial velocity to become the change in its own direction. This is the evidence of his mastery. Only a master could reverse his blade in the same moment he sought to stab it forward. Only a master of the sword could choose to let it go in the exact moment it was about to fulfill its destiny. That is truly letting go of the sword and embracing all around himself, so Nameless achieves peace. The logic of this is beautifully symbolic. From his lower perspective, vengeance and a self who rejects all under heaven, the king looks as if he is an obstacle in front of the scroll's realization. The irony of his lethal technique is it literally elevates him to the symbolic level of the king's plane of perspective of the scroll of all under heaven. Only here can Nameless see the king is not an obstacle before all under heaven from his then lower perspective, but on equal plane, seeing eye to eye, he sees the scroll as the king did, above himself, but at level enough plane to speckle with blood. This literal raise in the change of Nameless perspective to a higher one, closer metaphorically and physically to all under heaven, this complete change in his perspective enlightens him in the exact moment he needs to reverse the lethality of the strike into mercy. It is because his technique elevated his perspective, he saw the king's ambition, a goal above himself that from his lower perspective of vengeance looked to him like the king was equating himself to the scroll. Only upon being at the same level of the king, 0 paces before all under heaven, would he have seen that stabbing the king through would stain the scroll. So the absence of blood on the scroll, the survival of the king, from the symbolic significance of Nameless's mercy. On the exact other side of this choice, Nameless will walk the 100 paces away from all under heaven and the King of Qin, to his destiny to be slain by the archers of the court, forming the enso of his outline where the arrows strike him and not the gates behind. This forms a perfect symmetrically aligned by asymmetrically thematic resonance that aligns beautifully with the film's Tao and Chan philosophies. Instead of entering the staining the scroll of all under heaven with blood on the end of one choice, he instead decides to become the enso of selflessness on the gates of the wall, on the exact opposite side of where his choice to kill would have led to the opposite symbol. That is the brilliance of the film Hero. It is about how one man defeated the need to prove his self was more important than all under heaven, and so the universe makes his final act the symbol for the truth of peace.